lovely, and welcome to another episode of Loving Life with Court. Today we are talking about a life that is loved includes failure. What holds me back? What holds you back? What holds us all back is this fear of failure. And I've come to understand that this fear of failure is so irrational. It is something that has been holding us back ever since childhood, thinking about being in a jungle gym or wanting to jump from a high point and being too scared because you're not sure if you will succeed and you are so scared of failing. And I think that this is the beginning from our childhood. It's the beginning of where our limiting beliefs set in and our doubts and our fear turns into this fear of failure. It just continues to be this cycle where it holds us back. And what I want to do is explore today, in short, why failure, I believe, is truly a part of success. And it's a part of our journey, and it's what gets us to our destination. And I strongly believe that without failure, we would not be able to succeed. And I'll explain. First off, let's address the fear of failure. So it's something that everyone experiences at some point in their life, but it feels like failure is this big, scary monster that will ruin everything. But let's just be real for just a second by asking yourself, what are you really afraid of? Because fear of failure is just like a surface level. Like, what is going on underneath that? Is it the actual failure, or is it how we think the failure will define us? And especially when it comes to our career, this is something that I have had so much fear around, is fearing that if we fail financially, it defines our worth and our success for the rest of our life. So I want to really dive into that. The fear of failure often comes from worrying about what others think or about how failure might confirm our negative beliefs we already have about ourselves, and understand why there are so many other perspectives to what the fear of failure is. Something that I want you to take with you from this moment forward is failure doesn't define us. It's just a part of the process. And the reality is that almost every successful person has failed multiple times. They have faced failure and they have faced it many, many, many times. And I'm going to explore a few different perspectives and give you an example, or quite a few examples actually, of people you may know, people you may have heard of that have failed countless times and then have become the most successful person, well-known person around the world. Now, let's first by breaking up these different perspectives that I've been exploring. And the first one is the perspective of growth. Failure can really be reframed as a tool for growth. And think about learning to ride a bike, right? No one just gets on and rides smoothly the first time. There are wobbles and there are falls and scraped knees and frustration. But every time you fall, you learn something new. You learn how to balance better, how to shift your weight, how to steer with more control. That's failure in action, teaching you what doesn't work so that you can try something else. And I'll give you the example of Thomas Edison, the guy who invented the light bulb. He famously failed 1,000 times before finding the right filament. And when he was asked about it, he didn't see it as failure. He just said, and I absolutely love this quote, he said, "I have not failed. I have just found 1,000 ways that won't work." I have not failed. I have just found 1,000 ways that won't work. Failure is all a part of the success. And how do we succeed? We figure out the ways that work and the ways that don't work. So he learned from each attempt and he got closer to the right solution with each so-called failure. And this brings us to the second perspective that I've explored, is the perspective of resiliency. Now, failure also builds resilience. I'm sure with Thomas Edison, who spent 1,000 times trying to create a light bulb, He needed to be pretty resilient, right? And it's not the easiest thing to get back up after you've fallen, but that's how you develop strength. It's like lifting weights. If you only ever use light weights, your muscles won't grow. And it's the struggle, the challenge, and yes, even the failures that build us up. And I'll give you another example that I've shared on the show before is J.K. Rowling's first Harry Potter manuscript was rejected by multiple publishers, multiple. And if she had let that be her story, if she believed the fear of rejection and failure, Harry Potter would never have existed. Can we say that Harry Potter would have never existed? Saying it again. Instead, she kept going. She learned from her rejections, and now she's one of the most successful authors in the world. Now think about if she submitted her manuscript and received a no and believed that she failed and never tried again, think about who she would have been, who she would have became, right? And now look at your own situation. Maybe you've tried 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 100 times, but what if on your 101st time you did it? So when it comes to failing, when it comes to success, resiliency is so, so important. And that leads me to my next perspective, which is the perspective of wisdom. Failure teaches us wisdom. The more we fail, the more wise we become. And it's like when you're trying to solve a puzzle, right? Every piece that doesn't fit teaches us what will fit. And when you fail, you gather insights that you wouldn't have gotten if everything had gone perfectly from the start. So success isn't just about winning, it's about learning and refining and adjusting your approach. And this is the example, the simplest example, as becoming a world famous chef with your own recipes, creating your own recipes. Imagine a chef trying out a new recipe and they make mistakes with seasoning or cooking times, but with each attempt, they refine the dish until it's perfect. Without those initial failures, they wouldn't have learned how to perfect the dish in the first place, and they wouldn't have become the well-known chef that they may be today, right? The more you work on things, the more wise you become, the more things that you learn, and the more you're able to perfect the skills and fail along the way. And this leads us to one of our last perspectives. We have 2 more. The perspective of perspective. Failure isn't final. And what feels like a setback is often just a redirection. So it's like when you're driving to a new place and you miss your turn. Are you just going to go back home? Or does that mean that you just give up and stop trying to reach your destination? Of course not. You find another way, you reroute, and you continue moving forward. And failures in this sense are just detours on your journey to success. And when you can take these perspectives that I've touched on and combine them, this is where I say that when it comes to failing, it is essential to fail to succeed. And an example of this is Steve Jobs. I'm sure we all know who he is. He was famously fired from Apple, the very company he co-founded. And imagine that. But instead of giving up, he went on to create Pixar, which became a massive success. And then years later, Apple brought him back and he turned the company into one of the most valuable brands in the world. And that so-called failure was just a detour that led him to even greater success, where he was able to learn, where he was able to explore, become more wise, have more growth, and then have a new perspective on perspective, right? And now we have our last perspective, which is the perspective of self-acceptance. Finally, failure reminds us that it's okay to be imperfect. No one is perfect except for me. Just kidding. But really, no one is perfect except for the idea of perfection we create in our heads. And we need to give ourselves permission to fail and see it as part of the bigger picture, where we can see that failure, when we encourage failure, when we welcome failure, it gives us the opportunity to accept how things are and grow from it and become more wise from it. And when you take the stigma around failure, it becomes just another experience that contributes to really the richness of your life. And I'll close with this last example. And we all know who she is, Oprah Winfrey. She was fired from her first TV job as an anchor because they said she was unfit for television. If she had let that failure define her, she would never have gone on to become one of the most influential figures in media. Instead, she embraced her unique style and used her failure, the so-called failure that we are all so scared of and that is so irrational, to create the career that she has today. Now imagine, you could be the next Oprah Winfrey and whatever your goals or desires are, if you can welcome fear in your life. And at the end of the day, failure is a part of life. It's how we learn, it's how we grow, it's how we evolve into the people we're meant to be. So next time you fail, or when you're afraid to try because you're worried about failing, remind yourself that failure is not the end. It's simply a part of the journey. That's all it is. And remember that failure isn't something to fear. It's something to embrace because it brings you closer to the success you're aiming for. Every failure is an opportunity to learn, to adjust, and to come back even stronger. And guess what? You'll look back one day and realize that it was the failures that shaped your success. That's it. That's simple. When we fail, we get even closer to our success. So starting with accepting failure and being open to failure is just the start to succeeding. And that's today's episode. I love you so much. A friendly reminder to not only be kind to others, but also to your beautiful, amazing self. Don't forget to follow so that you never miss another episode, and I will see you next time.